Hello and welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethlie.
And we are the Youngs.
We're so glad you've joined us today as we continue in the book of Proverbs.
We are glad you've joined us today. Hope you've found these profitable as we talked. The Proverbs are profitable. And we have certainly enjoyed the study of them. The chapters are just loaded. My goodness, there's so many things. I have read Proverbs, I couldn't tell you how many times, because I was a teenager when someone told me I should read a proverb a day every month of the year. And for many years I did, and then I took a break from them, and then frequently I come back at least once or twice or 3 or 4 or 5 times a year. I read through the book of Proverbs. Mm-hmm. We've read through Proverbs several times with our family through the years as well. And just a loaded book. And we've kind of worked our way, skipping around and emphasizing themes. And we've kind of come to the Proverbs chapter 12 is where we are right now. And I've enjoyed just how Solomon just kind of jumps into things and throws things out and then moves on. And like in the book of Proverbs, he says, "A good man obtaineth favor of the Lord, but a man of wicked devices will he condemn." A good man. So he just throws that out there. A good man. God honors and favors a good man. And I want to be a good man. I want my sons to be good men. And hope all of you guys out there are good men, because God gives us favor when we're good men. And then he comes along and he talks about a virtuous woman is a crown to her husband. She that maketh ashamed is as a rottenness in his bones. And I thought that was kind of a funny way of saying it. I thought, wonder what he was trying to say there, and was he illustrating or alluding to a story?
Well, with all of the women in Solomon's life, I'm sure that there were a few that felt like rottenness in his bones. But it's a good illustration for us as wives to remember a virtuous woman is someone who is praised not only of her family, but of the Lord. And if you are not going to be virtuous, your husband is just going to feel like he's sick all the time. Yep.
So what he's talking about here is he's talking about a good man, and then he talks about a virtuous woman. What are some of the other things here he discusses? He throws in an animal or two and just a whole ton of stuff here. He has so many things to discuss.
And all in Proverbs chapter 12.
Yes.
So a good man, a virtuous woman. He talks about tilling your land. He talks about regarding the life of your beast.
A righteous man regards the life of his beast. So he talks about our animals. He that tills his land shall be satisfied with bread, but he that followeth vain persons is void of understanding. Sometimes the way the Hebrews wrote poetry and these wise sayings, we're so used to things being contrasted. This is true, but this is not.
Right.
And if this is true, then this is true. But sometimes the Proverbs are written in by the Hebrew mindset that can seem to say, that doesn't even fit. Where in the world are they going with that? And so one of the things, though, that shows up in Proverbs 12 is not just, about a good man and a good woman and taking care of your animals and all of that. He has a ton to say in Proverbs 12 about our words. And Beth and I want to submit to you that if you're going to have a happy life and a happy family, you have to emphasize the value of right words. So that's going to show up a ton here. And it really starts in verse 6. Do you want to get us started there? In
Yes.
Proverbs 12 and verse 6.
The words of the wicked are to lie in wait for blood, but the mouth of the upright shall deliver them.
That's a pretty heavy verse there. I don't even know everything Solomon was trying to say there, but this is where he starts drawing our attention to the power of words.
Right.
You almost get the idea he's saying it's deadly. There's blood. You can have bloodiness result of your words.
Your words can be very hurtful, apparently, and those who are wicked and use the power of those words, it's almost as if they're lying in wait to destroy you, to hurt you physically, bodily. And while we will, with the old adage of sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, that is so not true. And those of us who are adults, even children, know that that is not true. Our words can hurt us so badly. So this verse is just an illustration of that.
Sure. Verse 13 continues the idea of our words.
The wicked is snared by the transgression of his lips, but the just shall come out of trouble.
And what he's saying right there is you can get in a ton of trouble through your words.
Yes.
And isn't that true? You can say the wrong thing, and the next thing you know, there's a snare. You're snared because of your words. Words are hugely powerful. Verse 14 tells us that our words produce good.
A man shall be satisfied with good by the fruit of his mouth, and the recompense of a man's hands shall be rendered unto him.
Our words can produce value.
Yes.
It can be very good.
And that's what we're going to emphasize today.
And then look at verse 17.
He that speaketh truth showeth forth righteousness, but a false witness deceit.
One of the things that I hope you'll notice as we're studying through Proverbs here is that all of these areas of emphasis begin to become interwoven.
Yes.
We've talked about integrity and righteousness, and here now he's tying integrity and righteousness into our words. And we see that there, and he talks about truth versus dishonesty. We must continually strive for honesty and continually teach our children the value of honesty. And in reading that, he's talking about our words here, but it almost sounds like a repeat of what we've been teaching in the last few weeks. So it's connected to our words, yet another area where we have to emphasize. How do you evaluate? How are my children doing? Listen to their words. Are they honest?
Yes.
Are they dependable? Are they mean? Are they kind? Are they loving? Do they lie to you? You can listen to words. You find a lot about our children when it comes to words. I like verse 18. Verse 18 is a very powerful verse.
We use this verse a lot in our family. There is that speaketh like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health.
Now think about what he's saying there. We can either be deadly in our words or healthy in our words. We can tear down with our words or we can build up with our words. We can damage with our words or we can help with our words. We have to emphasize this. And in the culture we live in, if you don't believe this is an important area, take a little trip to Walmart, take a little trip to Target, go to a grocery store, and don't buy anything. Just wander the aisles and listen. Go to the airport and listen to the way families talk to each other, the way children respond to their parents, the way parents respond to their children. And what you'll find out is that the tongue is very deadly. It is a rare thing to hear someone talking in such a way where it is healthy, to where there's peace and there's contentment and we're building and strengthening. I would say that's a very important verse for marriage, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
And since this is a marriage and family podcast, let's talk about that. Our words can do massive damage in a marriage.
Yes, they can.
And how are some ways our words can do massive damage in a marriage?
Well, just this past Sunday, as we're recording, so this will be later in the summer, but recently we were home and our youth pastor was preaching, and he gave an illustration that honestly, when he started giving this illustration, I just started praying for him because, well, you'll just see when I give you the illustration, because you just have to be a brave man in our culture, even in Christian culture, to give this illustration. But he talked about a friend of his who was on fire for God, was really serving God, doing things that he knew the Lord wanted him to do, leading his family in the way that he thought the Lord wanted his family led. But he had started dropping off. And so our youth pastor had asked him, hey, what's going on in your life? Why aren't you serving God the way you used to? And he said, well, to be honest, he said, my wife has a Bible degree. My wife studies the Bible. My wife says that she knows more about the Bible than I do. And so everything that I felt led to do in our family for spirituality or for righteousness or for the church or for serving God, she had a better idea. No, we shouldn't do it this way. We should do it that way. No, that's not the right way. We should do it this way. And so he said, after a while, I just started feeling like, well, obviously, I don't do it right, so I'm just not going to do it at all. Ladies, oh my. And I have seen this in our travels, in our ministry, with families, with couples, over and over, how many times we as wives think we have a better idea. Maybe we do feel that we're more spiritual than our husband, and so we know better how to lead our family spiritually. Or even just in practical ways, I've seen girls all the time tell their husbands that they're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong, whether that be diapering the baby or helping with the children or helping with homework or helping with housework. And so we constantly, with our words, are undermining what we want done. Girls, if your husband is leading in any way, you should be jumping up and down and praising the Lord and saying, That is awesome. And instead of tearing them down and manipulating and constantly telling them that they're doing it wrong, just be thankful. We can so undermine our marriage by our words.
We get the habit of responding in the intensity of a moment,
Yes.
and ridiculing and cutting down and belittling and always correcting. When we get in that habit, whether it's the husband or the wife, it's an unhealthy
Yes.
use of our words.
Yes.
And it will damage your marriage. And in the moment, the reason it's hard to see is because it takes time. A person, early in a marriage can brush things off. But in a marriage where one of the spouse is always negative, always belittling, always rolling her eyes and sighing, or his eyes and sighing, when that happens, in a process of time, there is damage done in a heart that in our culture sometimes is deemed irreparable, and the marriage either struggles on for years, two unhappy people living together. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the one that's the cause of it in the initial stages can't even understand what's going on. And sometimes frequently in our culture, it ends in divorce. And it's not God's plan. It just reminds us that our words can do massive damage in a marriage.
And I would even say, girls, be careful. Sometimes we think that we're doing it okay, that we're correcting, for lack of a better word, our husband in a sweet way because we're using a nice tone. And we're like, no, don't do it that way. Oh my goodness, no, do it this way. And we think we're being sweet. But if that is constant, your husband will start to feel in a matter of time, I can't do anything right, so I'm just not going to do it at all.
Yeah, and there comes a point when a husband stops helping with the children, stops helping with the meals, stops helping with the cleaning. And when a husband feels like he cannot keep his wife happy, he stops trying.
And it can go the other way too.
Yeah.
If a wife feels like she can never live up to the expectations of her husband, if he's constantly belittling her or comparing her to other people, then eventually that wife will stop trying to.
And so we're speaking in terms of marriage here, that our words can do massive damage. When we speak in never and always terminology, that's unwise. When we're just mean to each other. And sometimes we just are, and we don't even realize it. That's just a mean thing to say. And sometimes we're around couples and it's uncomfortable for everybody around them, but the person who's being mean sometimes doesn't even realize how uncomfortable they really are making it. Hopefully all of us have people in our lives who can step in and correct us and say, you should change that. And we should be continually growing spiritually and recognizing these areas in our life. Even if nobody ever comes along and corrects us, we should be correcting ourselves.
It can be difficult to see also because sometimes we do it with humor. The meanness, as the Bible says, the speaking like the piercing of a sword is done in, can we say, and with this sense of humor, like, isn't this hilarious that I just cut down my spouse in this particular way? The culture is all laughing at it, but by the standards of the Word of God, that's just being mean, and you're just piercing your spouse just like you would if you had a sword.
Yeah, there are some couples we're with where the husband will always bring up a fault in a perceived fault in their spouse, in his wife, and he laughs about it. And he'll do it in such a way that everybody's laughing. Or she will bring up a perceived fault in her husband in a public way and ridicule. It's funny, haha, isn't this hilarious that he always or she always does this? And isn't it funny how he does that? Oh my word, can you believe that my husband or my wife would do that? And what you're doing there is you are on the wrong side of this verse.
Right.
You are speaking with the piercings of a sword. And sometimes we do it when we make broad assumptions in our moments of intensity. You just did that because you don't care about our family. Now, hold on a minute. If you stop and think about that reasonably, that's not true. That's not why that, or you always bring, because you just want to hurt me. Well, likely that's not true. It could be, but likely that broad assumption is not true. It is just as true in this verse that our words can do massive damage, but they can also do phenomenal good.
Yes.
Because read that verse again. Let's not miss the verse.
There is that speaketh like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health.
We have the ability to speak in a way that we are continually healing our spouse and our relationship.
Yes.
When we are loving, when we are gentle. Bethlie and I have learned that even when we do things differently than the other one would do, that it's okay.
Yes.
If she does it one way and I do it a different way, we don't have to ridicule each other. We don't have to be right.
Right.
We can still be sweet. We can still be loving. We can still be supportive. We can still say, oh, I didn't know you did it that way.
Oh, we can
And it's
say,
okay.
thank you for doing that.
Yes.
Like loading the dishwasher. How many different ways are there to load a dishwasher? There are so many ways. Instead of getting onto each other, and I've heard this from both husbands and wives. Why would you put it in this way? Put it in this way, whatever. So it's not just wives that talk about the loading of the dishwasher, but just be thankful they loaded the dishwasher. The dishes get in there, and then you can turn it on and they can get clean. So just be thankful.
Yeah. And if for some reason they're put in a wrong way and it doesn't get fully clean, wash it.
Yes.
It's fine. Don't allow your words to be on the wrong side of Proverbs 12:18.
Yes, make sure that they are bringing healing. And can I say that it says the tongue of the wise is health? That doesn't mean that you're just silent then. Well, if I can't say anything nice about them, I'm just not going to say anything at all. That's not true. You cannot just live that way. You can't live in silence. You must speak if your words are going to bring health.
And you know what? It might be a good question for some of you. If you feel like there's a tension in your marriage, it might be a good question to have a date or a time when you can talk privately and just gently and quietly ask the question, do my words hurt you? Is there anything I'm doing in the way I talk that makes you uncomfortable? And you should be willing to ask those questions and hear the answer without reacting to it, without getting defensive,
right.
without, getting angry. If we will continually evaluate our words in our marriage, what we can do is use our words to bring health to our relationship of our marriage.
And not just health and healing to each other's hearts, but just a healthy marriage.
Yes.
I don't know how many times we're around other couples who will comment about how we treat each other. And that takes, just like we've talked about before, it takes diligence, it takes integrity, it takes righteousness, It takes living out the truths of the Word of God in our marriage. It's not that we've got this down pat. We do have sometimes words that wound each other, and then we have to make that right. But we are around other couples who will comment, are you guys like this all the time? Well, yes, we are.
We try to be.
We try to be,
yes,
because we do try to use words that bring health and healing and love to our marriage. And then that in turn just is a healthy marriage that is an example to this culture that uses words in such ugly ways.
And we try to teach our children to always be positive to their spouse, especially in public, but also in private.
Yes.
Always speak of, my spouse is so handsome. My spouse is so beautiful. She's a wonderful mother. He's a wonderful daddy. We always wanted our children to speak well of each other, of their spouse. And Bethlie and I have tried to do that. What I have discovered, and this just always catches me off guard, in our ministry, in our emphasis, Bethlie and I do not just put it on in public. We practice what we do, and it becomes the norm of our life. And it is the norm of my life to speak well of my wife when I speak. When I speak anywhere, I promote Bethlie. I tell people she's part of my ministry, my best friend, my favorite person. And I tell teenagers frequently, she's my girlfriend and my spouse. And, it's amazing to me how so many people are like, I've never heard a man do that before. Or they'll say things like, are you guys for real? And the fact of the matter is, we are for real because we believe this is a vital key to a happy, important relationship. We always want to be on the right side of Proverbs 12 and verse 18.
And I love the way that you said that, because we're going to talk about being aware of the norms of our society. There can be norms in our society and our culture that are not healthful words. They're not helpful. They're not healthful, but
they're not healthy.
Yes, there we go. But to always use those words that are encouraging, that are building, that are loving, that are affectionate, it does become a norm. And I don't know how many times I'm around young ladies, other married ladies, who will say, that's just you guys, or that's not normal. People don't talk about their spouses like that, or people don't talk to each other like that. Always people talk with harshness when they're talking to their spouse, or they use belittling words. It's okay. Or they use sarcasm, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you are practicing biblical words that bring health to your marriage and family, it can become the norm of your family culture.
And I would say this gently, if you are one of those who would say the things that Bethlie just alluded to there, I would say this very gently. I think you're probably making an excuse for your wrong. Because when you think it's okay to be sarcastic and belittling and negative and unkind and rude to your spouse, just because that's my spouse and I have a right to be that way, and everybody is that way, what you're doing there is you're saying, I don't believe the Bible. I don't have a problem with taking my words and stabbing my spouse. What you're doing is you're robbing yourself. You're first of all evidencing that you're wrong, but you're also, unbeknown maybe, but it's true, robbing yourself of the joy of a Christian marriage.
Yes.
Where there's health. And this is a great verse for our marriage, but it's also a great verse for our children. And when it comes to our families, we do have to be aware of the norms in our society, because it is normal in our society to be sarcastic. How many reels? Belittling. How many Instagram reels make a point from a rude perspective?
Oh, yes. They're totally about belittling other people.
Belittling, sarcasm, negativity, unkindness, and rudeness, all for the humor. And it may make for great humor, but it makes for lousy relationships.
Yes. If you implement that into your home on a daily basis, that just will not be healthy for your family.
And so you've got to be aware of the norms in the society and determined to be different.
Yes.
Because things like this, think about this. In your family, did you know that gratitude is healthy?
It is.
When you say, thank you for folding the laundry, thank you for making the bed, thank you for cooking the meal, thank you for washing the dishes, thank you for putting that in the dishwasher.
And I've even heard parents or spouses say this about, well, that just has to be done. That's just something that we do. Why do I have to say thank you for that? Well, because a grateful heart is a happy heart, and a happy heart is a grateful home, and then that is so much more healthy than an ungrateful, sarcastic, rude household.
Gratitude is different than the norms of an ungodly world. Kindness is different than the norms of an ungodly world. We refuse to let our children be unkind to each other. If you're going to treat your sibling unkindly, we would spank you for it.
Yes, or we would at least say, can you say that in a more kind manner? And it would bring them up short. And sometimes they didn't even realize they were being unkind. Sometimes they were being unkind on purpose and they knew it. But it gave them opportunity to correct their behavior, and most of the time they did.
Yes. So gratitude, kindness, sincerity is healthy. This is a big one, because rarely are couples and families sincere with each other now. We would rather be funny. We would rather, roll our eyes and sigh. We would rather have a little cut to our words. But sincerity says, I love you. Sincerity says, you're amazing. Sincerity says, you're beautiful. Sincerity says, I'm on your side. Sincerity says, I'm not going to ridicule you. Gentleness, respect, all of these are healthy words that we have to learn, and we have to determine to live differently than the world that we live in. So this is a great verse, Proverbs 12 and verse 18. It's a great verse. And we just continually have to live it, model it, teach it. This is important. There are a couple of other verses. Let's at least just touch them. What does verse 19 say in Proverbs 12? Verse 19.
The lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment.
Truth is eternal. And so we should always emphasize being honest. How about Proverbs 12, verse 22?
Lying lips are abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight.
Now, that's a powerful verse. We don't have time to deal with it a great deal, but this verse reminds us of just how important our words really are. Jesus himself said, every idle word that we speak, we are accountable for in the day of judgment. That's a heavy verse.
Yes, it is.
And James 3 warns us in the first verse of James chapter 3, the passage about the tongue. He warns against desiring to be a teacher, which is just really kind of a weird thing to warn about. But the point in the text is, because teaching uses words, and words that are wrong do incredible harm. And what a lesson for our culture. Because an Instagram influencer whose words are wrong when it comes to parenting does incredible harm. We've got to be wise about that. And when teaching brings harm, when teaching harms, it brings widespread destruction.
Yes.
Maybe the most obvious of that for those of us who are believers are the theories of Charles Darwin. When the theories he laid out, many would trace the idea of evolution as a part of why there was a Holocaust, because it was this idea that we are better than others. and the damage that has been done by those words is widespread. How about one more verse? We have time for one more verse. How about verse 25?
Verse 25. Let me turn here. Heaviness in the heart of man maketh it stoop, but a good word maketh it glad.
The idea of heaviness is anxiety, an anxious heart. It's heavy. It's depressed. Right. He reminds us here that we live in a world, in this kind of our world.
Yes.
We live in a world of such heaviness.
Well, it is the most anxious generation that they have on record. And our children are being proven, I don't have the stats right here in front of me, but children at very young ages are being diagnosed with anxiety disorders.
Yes, and one of the most powerful books I've started reading recently is the book called The Anxious Generation. And it's actually a recently written book full of stats, full of charts, and actually what the author, who is not a believer, what the author calls for, most parents would be uneasy about. He calls for our children not to have social media. He calls for our children not to have smartphones. And he's actually calling for laws to be passed by it because of the damage it's doing to our generation. But what Solomon says here is that words have a part in this, because when a person is heavy in their heart, they're anxious, they're depressed, he says that a good word can make it glad. In other words, we can replace anxiety with joy. And we can do that with our words. Sometimes that goes back to speaking to ourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. Sometimes when I am down, when I'm going through a battle, when I'm feeling frustrated, what I am to do is to speak to myself words that lift me out of the anxiety and bring me to a glad heart. And when I have the chance to do so, I'm to help those around me who are anxious, who have a heavy heart. My words are to help them. Our culture gets to the point where we say nothing to each other. We don't talk to each other, but our words have the ability to bring gladness to heavy hearts. So they can change everything. Learn to speak up for right. That doesn't mean you get in people's face and yell, but it means that you remind people of truth and learn to speak up for encouragement, that you strengthen each other. Learn to speak up for edification. These are just important words, and we are running out of time here.
Yes, I feel like we could do probably 2 episodes on our words, and I don't think we will. But maybe you could just delve into Proverbs chapter 12 yourself and remind yourself, and then remind your family how important our words really, really, truly are, whether we use them for right or whether we use them for damaging each other.
Yeah, and as we close, I just throw a couple of thoughts at you. Make sure that you model for your family, moms and dads. Your children do respond when they hear you. The way you talk is how they will talk. The way you respond to your husband is how they will respond. The way you respond to your wife is how your child will respond. Be careful about bywords. We work diligently to be careful about bywords. Certainly cursing is wrong. That should never be part of our lives.
Right. We just don't even want the form of the word. And our children do know this, and some of our older children will use words that we did not let them use growing up.
And they will smirk at their mother when they do.
I will say they do not use profanity at all. They do walk righteously with God, but they will say, Mom, there's nothing wrong with that word. It's just a little close. And Mom's just like, it's too close. It's too close for me. So in our home, we did not allow that.
And as moms and dads, find practical ways to teach your children honesty and politeness and kindness. The point being, because words matter. Well, we are out of time. Thank you for joining us so far in this series in Proverbs. We are loving it. If we can help you in any way at all, you reach out to us. Like, subscribe, leave us a rating, at least put into practice while you're learning. And we would be thrilled if you'd do that.
Yes, and we would love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Well, have a great week, and whatever else you do, make sure that you serve the Lord with gladness.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production.